Hey, welcome back, Hillsboro Christian Church, and anyone who's watching this video. This is our Starting Point responses for Session 4 of Starting Point. We're excited that you're here. We're gonna answer a few questions. Hopefully, you have watched Session 4 and before. If you haven't, you might go back and watch those and just catch up and just get back with us, caught up, ready to talk about these questions. We have a few questions to answer today, and so my name is Zach, and this is Andy. And we're going to be answering those questions and just having some candid dialogue about these questions, just because we want to just have an open conversation about this. So if you want to ask a question in the future, you can send an email to respond@hillsborochristianchurch.com, and that's where we're getting some of these questions from, and we'll be able to just start this conversation. And so we're going to go ahead and start with question number 1, which is, what is it about a rule that makes it feel controlling instead of caring?
Well, I think the first thing would be if we're talking about a neutral rule, right? Because some rules can be controlling.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my parents gave me some rules that were to control me because I was out of control.
So in a good way, because that could be bad also.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So is there a motivation behind the rule? I think a lot of it also has to deal with, do I feel like I'm losing control?
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's one of those challenges where, I'm an American and I love freedom. And I want to be able to do something even if I don't want to do it. I don't want to be told no.
Do you like rules in general? Or because I feel like I'm okay with rules, and I feel like there's a purpose. So
right.
It might matter like how you come into that question. Like, do I like rules or do I feel offended by rules?
So I like some rules. I think rules are great in terms of, we have traffic lights, and traffic lights are great because otherwise we would have some chaos. So rules provide some order,
safety.
Yeah, safety.
Yeah.
But there are times where you can get frustrated by a rule because whether you think, okay, well that rule is for this cause, but it doesn't really apply to me at this time for this reason.
That rule is stopping me from getting to work.
Yeah.
Because I need to get to work, and even though I was late, and even though I was doing whatever I was supposed to be doing that wasn't getting me to work, now I'm stuck at this light. And I feel like that's a lot of the time for me what causes, like, where I end up when I am disliking a rule.
Yeah,
it's just an inconvenience thing. So.
Yeah, if it's gonna restrict me or something like that, and in terms of a speed limit rule, it's there for your safety and for the safety of others. I think we understand that, but we don't often follow. And statistically, I don't know how many people would say that they don't follow the speed limit to an officer, but they certainly admit it in church when we say, hey, how many of you have broken the speed limit?
That one hits close to home because, as you guys know, in Hillsboro, the speed limit went down 5 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, when it's only 40, like 5 miles is quite...
No, it's 35.
I'm saying when it was 40,
okay, sure,
cut down to 35. So
I just had this conversation with Nathan in the car because Nathan's a rule follower, and when he's playing a game, he wants to know what the rules are. He gets frustrated if people don't follow the rules. Personality wise, that's kind of who he is, and he said, well, now that the speed limit's 35, at least people will go 40.
So because he's assuming that people are
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that is kind of an assumption that we make, especially in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes rules do feel controlling, but it's nice to see when someone has given us a rule and we discover that it's for care.
Right.
But rules being like restrictive in nature, I think, can make someone perceive them as controlling just from the get-go. And so when you're trying to give even your kids, which I think we're going to talk maybe a little bit about that later, but just giving rules to your kids a lot of times are for care, and they aren't just because just for no reason.
Yeah.
But they can feel that way, especially if you, as the person receiving the rule, can't see that or don't see the
if you don't
purpose
understand
behind it.
The reason or the why.
Oh, it's very hard to try to follow that rule that you don't understand. And so I think if you don't struggle with that at all, like, man,
you're probably lying.
You're probably lying. I was going to say, just let me wear those shoes for a little bit because I think we're a little bit like almost like built in that we want to make our own rules and we want to do our own thing, and so something that's built into us.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So the second question says this: in general, how do you react to rules? And then the follow up would be, what rules are the hardest for you to keep? So
we're probably just going to answer that, I guess, personally.
Yeah.
I actually I may fall in where Nathan falls. I think I have a tendency to want to follow the rules, especially if they're given. Like when you get a job, a lot of times you get a list of things that they want you to do, and I want to do. I think that will make them happy. That's my first response there. And so I want to do the things that will make them happy because we have a relationship, which is not on purpose saying that concerning the topic relationship to rules.
Right.
Or the role of rules, I think is the title.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like they're going to pay you money for working there. So why would you not want to work there? And that's my opinion. So I know that people are going to fall different ways. Like, what's your first response there?
Yeah, I guess if you say, how do you react to rules? I think really my first thought is, that I'm going to follow them. But it's like then that second thing is I'm going to follow them if they make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If it makes sense, if there's some reason behind them. I am the one who says if I don't like the rules, then we should change them.
Yeah.
So I think my first thought wouldn't be just to disobey. My first thought would be, who do I need to talk to find out if we can make an exception or if we can change this.
Yeah.
So I've kind of had, I don't know, not so much that I would see in Nathan where he's just a stringent rule follower and says, hey, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
But I am definitely in that sense of if there's a rule that doesn't make sense to me, then I want to know, is there any not wiggle room in that sense of like, can I justify my actions and still do what I want to? But is there a way that we can make an adjustment? That's kind of how I felt. I
think for me, like sometimes it feels like if someone's rewarded for not following the rules, like that really bothers me inside. And so I remember playing a game, Settlers of Catan, and a guy that we were playing with was really good at just making things work. And the rules in that game, when you're like trading, it's kind of like you can do whatever you want. And so, and that's not really a rule like for it or against it. It's just if somebody starts trading in a specific way, and he started trading, and we were like, what? Like we didn't know you could do that, and he's like, you can do whatever you want, and so it's like, oh, that's sour. So yeah, if someone gets rewarded for not following the rules, I think that kind of puts a weird feeling in my mind. So
yeah, I think things that are difficult for me are especially when I'll say Christians don't follow the rules. And so we go to a group of concerts called Winter Jam, and when you stand outside in front of a facility forever, and then you have what is obviously a youth group, kind of come in and cut in front of you.
Yeah.
That to me is like, man, like we should be able to follow the rules, even if.
And I would say that their leader is the one, like showing them what to do, and you're like, what's going on?
Right, right. Hey, everybody, come up here, and I think it's that thing, kind of a thing. Even if there's not a written rule, I think there's some general understanding that there is a rule to follow. So yeah, I think those are the things. When it says what are the hardest for you to keep, I think for me it's when I don't understand it, or when it's when a rule seems maybe almost like it was poorly written.
Ooh, yeah.
If a rule is poorly written, then you don't know, like, in what way am I supposed to follow this, and if other people are taking advantage of it, that it seems like they're not following the heart of the law.
Yeah.
You know, or that rule. Those are the ones that are hard for me to follow, because I want to follow it more closely so that I'm a good example to others.
Yeah.
But when other people are like, oh, well, you don't technically have to do that, that's difficult. Those are the situations that are most difficult.
Yeah, I think like not being able to see the goal in the rule, and then being asked to trust in the midst of not knowing. I think that's hard for me. If someone says, "Hey, I need you to do this," but I can't tell you why, like, man, that's tough.
Yeah,
that's tough for me. So when you know and you can see the obvious things, I think those are easy. And so, like, even in this, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun, but talking about the 10 Commandments in this session, I thought was really good. And I can see a lot of good things coming from those. Andy kind of talked about the first commandment, and they're like, that's the thing you wanted to tell us. And so I think when we can see the obvious ways that anyone giving us a rule, and then as we foreshadow that God is giving us rules, if we can't see the reason behind it, it's hard to follow. And so we have to continue to try to find those reasons.
Well, I think that's a good segue into this next question, because it really is that somebody who has authority over you also has a deep and abiding care for you. So that's what should be present in a parent-child relationship.
Yeah.
So I'll try to word this succinctly. But what is it like, I guess, for you to make rules for your kids?
Yeah.
How would, I guess, so that's the first part. And then why do you make them? Like, what's the underlying purpose or reason?
I think so when Rachel and I were like talking about relationship, like early on, like our relationship and moving forward, we were asked, like, what are our family's rules? And so we were coming in to this relationship with each other with a set of different family rules. She kind of grew up in still a city, but kind of in the country, and I grew up in the city, and so we were starting from different places there. And both of our sets of parents, her parents were in ministry, my parents were not, and so we're coming from different, like, rules and regulations on what you can do, what things you can watch. And so we had to kind of identify some of those family rules together and say, like, well, what was your family like? What were things that weren't even spoken but were a rule? And so we kind of had to get that out on, like, at the beginning, which
Sure.
If you are married and you're watching this and you haven't talked about your families in that way, please talk about your families that way. It's helpful.
Or if you're going to get married
Yeah.
and you haven't talked
Yeah.
about this yet. Yeah.
Yeah, so making rules for your own kids, I think can maybe come by an accident sometimes. And you have these rules that are unspoken rules that you don't realize that you're making, but then come to find out, well, you may not even realize it, but your kids would say, oh yeah, you have this rule and you've never said it.
Yeah.
And those are kind of tough. Making rules for my own kids, I think my first thought there is like safety is important for my kids. And those obvious rules are like, don't go outside unless we tell you can, or if no one's around, don't go outside. And my kids are almost 4 and 1.5, almost 2. So like that's a big one, because we live on a fairly busy street, and like, don't go outside. Like, those safety concerns. Some ones that are a little more like subtle are like, be nice to your brother. Like, that's a rule that we have, like don't talk to him in a mean way. And so we don't want to police those, but we expect them to act that way, and so we repeat that and we tell them that. So it's not a written rule that we post everywhere, but it's something that we have as an unwritten.
Well, and at different stages, then some of those things change, certainly. I mean,
yeah.
My kids are 17 and 19, and we don't have a rule of don't go outside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
that might be a strange rule.
But we do have, there is this expectation that the rules have guided them into wisdom. And so, now that they're 17 and 19, if
Yeah.
there's a hailstorm going on outside, they know it's not an appropriate time to go outside.
Yeah.
I think establishing rules has led them into good decision making, which in a lot of ways that's what that goal is.
Yeah, this is a good question for us to talk about, for Andy and I to talk about, because we have kids in completely different circumstances, and I'm more of a newer, in terms of the age of my kids, a newer dad, and Andy is not as new. He's an older dad, so we have two different perspectives, and the rules that you're giving your kids now are totally different because they have different abilities. And
I still remember those times, though. I mean, when a rule for Nathan was don't hit your sister, and a rule for Karina was don't make faces at your brother. So it's like, I guess at some level those are still rules, but they're not really ones we have to say anymore. It's kind of like it's now built into their character and their actions. They understood the why, behind those.
One of the ones that is one that I know is one that I've never said to them as plotted it out, but I don't want my kids to eat candy for breakfast, and I mean that seriously, because they wake up in the morning and they say,
"Can we have candy?"
Lucas is like, "Fruit snacks?" And I'm like, "No, you can't have fruit snacks." And so even if it's something that we end up giving them that's sweet, I try to keep them from just eating sugar for breakfast. And that's something that I've never said, we don't eat candy for breakfast, but he'll say fruit snacks, and I'm like, "No, buddy, I tell you every morning you can't have fruit snacks." And he about every morning asks for fruit snacks. And so, but that's something that he may learn without me ever saying, "I don't want you to eat candy for breakfast."
Right.
So, but for me, I feel like that's something that is building a habit that he can take with him for the rest of his life. That if we do have the habit of eating candy for breakfast every morning, it's not necessarily going to make us a bad person, but in my mind, it feels like that's the right thing to do. And in the difference between me and God, I don't have a perfect view of everything, and so my rule might be don't eat candy for breakfast, and God's rule may be something that is more serious and more caring for my well-being for my entire life.
Yeah.
And so why do you make them? Was the underlying purpose or motivation? Anything else you want to say about that rule?
I mean, I think just when there's a relationship, when not just with the rules, but the rule giver.
Yeah.
I think understanding that there is an underlying cause, that there is a motivation, and for our kids, we wanted the rules to be age appropriate.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure, that we answered why, and that's more important as they get older.
Yeah.
I think our tendency is when they're younger that we explain in a way that they can't even understand. Mm-hmm. We'll say, well, you can't have fruit snacks for breakfast because they're high in sugar, and they don't understand that. They know they taste good, right?
Yeah.
But when kids get older, we can have this tendency to say, because I said so. Mm-hmm. And that's really when we need to equip them for facing those more difficult things in life. Why can't I stay out later? Because I said so. It doesn't say because I value you, I care for you, and it's going to be safer for you. And nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some things that help express value and care, and they bring some clarity to the rule.
And we take those experiences that we've learned through, that we know through experiencing those things. I don't know if I said that the right way, but our knowledge there, and we can wrap those up into rules for our kids. And I think that's our not that we can see the future, mm-hmm. but we've kind of experienced those things. But the difference there with God is that God does see the future, and He has seen the past as well. And so He was there when people of the Bible were making mistakes, and people who aren't even written in the Bible were making mistakes, and or maybe serial mistakes. But
serial mistakers.
But so He knows that, and so the rules that He gives are made from His knowing what is true, because He is true.
He does that from a step of knowledge and care. It's both, and so it's not like you might be able to say to your parents, well, you just don't understand, right? We might be able to say that to them, and it might be accurate at times.
Yeah.
That's not with the Lord.
Yeah.
Like he does clearly know, and he cares about us more than we even care about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Okay, let's move to the next question. What happens to a relationship when someone breaks a rule? So what happens to a relationship when someone breaks a rule? What do you think?
Well, I think the simplest answer would be to say it begins to be strained. Right? I mean,
it's at least conflict, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it might depend on what rule, but man, if there's a rule and it's important to the rule giver, like it could be pretty serious. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it could eventually sever the relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, and if it's a rule that the rule giver doesn't care about, it doesn't really mess with the relationship at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of that challenge. I mean, because we're not just talking about rules here. I mean, we're talking about. I guess we should relate this to God's instructions, and so all the instructions that God gives us, it's important for us to follow. We talked a little bit last week just about sin, and if God says do not commit adultery, and He also says do not murder. It's not that you can not commit adultery and then you can murder and be okay. You become a lawbreaker at any point that you fail. So our relationship with God, in that sense, when it breaks, we need an answer, which is only Jesus.
Yeah.
It's not do better. It's not clean up and try harder.
Yeah.
It's only Jesus. But I would say in human relationships, if your wife said, "Hey, listen, when you come home, I don't want you to leave your socks in the middle of the floor, and I don't want you to leave things around because it just becomes difficult, and the kids pick them up, and they,
Yeah.
But you kept on doing that. It would express, I don't respect you,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't care about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There would be some level of, some strife there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, something didn't go like as expected in that
Right.
circumstance. So
I would say a note to husbands: if your wife repeats something often, it's because it's important to her, and you would do well to listen. Right? I mean, I think that's when we repeat something often. That's usually a thing that we're communicating. Hey, this is important to me, and I want to make sure that you know it's important.
Yeah. One thing that doesn't happen when someone breaks a rule is relationships don't break off completely when someone breaks a rule.
Right.
Normally, if it's a bad enough offense, I suppose it could, but I think definitely in our relationship with God, He doesn't call it off once we break a rule. He doesn't say, "I'm totally done with you," but more often we're offered grace instead of condemnation.
And I think at the heart of it, that's part of what Andy Stanley is really trying to get at here. He identifies three types of relationships in terms of the rules, and he says there's a family model, there's a club model, and then there's your neighborhood association model.
We have a couple of those around here.
Yeah.
So,
and so you just kind of think through, what does that look like? I mean, I think we would certainly say that there are problems of breaking the rules in all of those models, no matter how we're understanding it. But what he's saying is really God has established rules because there's already a relationship. He's saying, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt." I also found it interesting, which it's not in here, but he says you need to know where the rules are. And so he says, I want everybody to practice this. Practice this, even if you're home alone. Say Exodus.
Oh yeah.
And he has everybody say Exodus. And then he says 20.
Yeah.
Right? And Exodus 20 is where we find the Ten Commandments. Prior to the Ten Commandments being given, he's established the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He's saved them from captivity and slavery.
Yeah.
He's freed them, and he says, now that I've done this, I've established that I am your God, that you are my people. I want you to have no other gods before me. And so that's kind of that family model.
Yeah.
That you get to give instructions and rules for your own children, right? But you don't get to for the kids next door.
Nope.
Because you have a relationship.
Yeah. I've heard it said that like a people is defined by the rules that they follow. Like even like the Vikings, I think they have a reputation of being a little bit reckless. But it's because like they are going to kill you, like, and they don't care.
Don't worry about it. Be secure.
And I'm probably generalizing there,
Yeah.
but just some people are like, oh yeah, I know that type of person because this is what they do, and these are the rules that they follow. And so as Christians, we want to be God's people and known because of the way that we act, and that's kind of like how our rules feed into identity.
I think it's like, it's not just what we value, but it's who we value. Like I think that becomes more clear, kind of in that, and just to make clear what happens in our relationship with the Lord. Like God wants us, when we sin, to have this, I'll just say this remorse that leads us to repentance, that leads to reconciliation, and then a greater intimacy before, because there's a level of trust that we say, just because I've broken a rule, he doesn't wipe out the relationship.
Yeah, and the prodigal son realizes how good he had it.
Yeah. Once
he's separated from his father, and so we experience that when we're separated and we get to return, and we're presented with a ring and a party, like that's what he gets. And so when we come back to that to God from our places that were far off, we can see how good we had it before, and
for sure.
And that the rules aren't necessarily bad,
Yeah.
So
you want to. So there's this is one of the submitted questions, and I think it's a good follow up to that one. You want to read that one?
Yeah. Doesn't breaking the rules, even in the family model, create a broken relationship?
Well, I would say at some level, yeah. I mean, I've been really fortunate, and our kids, for the most part, haven't done anything that really is a painful violation of rules. But there are situations where, for one reason or another, families go through deep betrayal.
Yeah.
Really significant hardship, and it's caused families to fracture. So is that possible in a family model? Sure. But I would say that God's intention is that there would always be a path back.
Yeah.
That there would always be the ability for reconciliation.
And sometimes it's hard to forgive the people who do something wrong. Not even as a parent and a child with, I set the rules and you follow the rules, but even with, like, we have things with our friends that this is a rule that you wouldn't break, and when we feel hurt, there's an aspect of like humility and just making up to them that we have to participate in to make that relationship right.
Sure. So one of the things that I've noticed, though, is as my kids get older and they've moved into this stage of life where they're not just needing to be taught and have rules established for them, but they're able to perceive and use wisdom in ways that are even in simple things, like at the McDonald's drive-thru. I'll just tell you, often the trash can that's available is full.
Yeah.
And there have been times in the past where if I had a cup or something and I could fit it into the opening, I would put it in the opening. And there was a time where Nathan is sitting, in the seat with me, and he said, "Dad, don't do that. Like, that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, if you do that, it's going to be so hard for them to clean that part out, and that's just not right. And I said, okay, I won't do that.
Yeah.
And really, like, honestly, to this point, even when it's inconvenient, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Because he's right.
He
And
is.
it's not necessarily that's a rule, but in some ways for us as a family, it's now an unwritten rule. Like, don't do things that just would make something hard for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My dad would always make us like leave a campsite better than when we found it, and that's something that isn't even. It's kind of like not even a rule. It's just like let's try to make someone else's life better than it was before we got here.
Yeah.
So and I think that's what we can continue to do to just help others, and that's not even. I mean, I guess it's Christian, but that's just a thing that we can do to be good people. And so.
Yeah. Okay, so a second part of our follow-up says, Andy Sidley makes it sound as if that only occurs in the club model. Doesn't the act of asking for forgiveness and repenting from the broken rule restore the individual in both models? And I would say, yeah. I mean, even in the, what's it called, the homeowners association model,
Mm-hmm.
I think repenting and reacting in the positive way to the rule, like, kind of restores the relationship. You're no longer in default, or whatever they would call that. So I think
your grass is too long.
Yeah, right. Your grass is too long, and you
cut
say,
your grass and you make
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sometimes in those instances, there's a fine to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing for us in our relationship with God is the fine has been paid.
Yeah.
At the cost of Christ on a cross. And so we don't have to second guess, does God still love me? He already knows that we're broken. That's the reason Jesus had to come. Because we're rule breakers. And so knowing that we're rule breakers, God established a relationship with us through Christ on the cross. That's the time that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at this place where we don't have to anymore ask that question, does God still love me even though I'm a rule breaker?
Yeah.
He knew you were a rule breaker, and he sent Jesus to die for you.
Yeah, the hardest thing about that is that the rules still matter,
The rules still matter.
for our good, but it's still that no matter how much we try, Jesus is covering the things that we do wrong.
Right. And so now my motivation to follow the rules is different.
Yeah.
It's not that there's somebody who's trying to impose rules on me, but the one who sent his only son to suffer and die for me so that I could be forgiven. He's given me rules for my own benefit.
Yeah.
And so out of a way to honor him and to worship him, I say, okay, help me to follow what it is that you've called me to do.
Yeah, he's the only one that can make those things right. And so, because really, God's wrath and the purpose of the rule still matters.
Yeah.
Whether we have a relationship with him or not.
Sure.
And so, okay, I think that is it. So,
yeah. So, other than just the encouragement to ask you to, hey, continue to post questions. We're excited to answer those for you. I've been enjoying it. Actually, my family just a little bit ago was watching another one of the videos. We've just been enjoying that even as a family. So
yeah.
I would encourage you to participate in that way.
Yeah, the videos, it's most helpful that they are enjoyable to watch, and Andy Stanley cracks a joke every once in a while.
Sure.
So that's good. But anyways, we're so glad that you guys have joined us again for this response session.
Sure.
And it's been fun for us to kind of talk through these things and to hear what you guys have to say and the questions that you have to ask. And if you haven't posted a question yet, feel free to post a question. Like I said at the beginning, you can send that to respond@hillsborochristianchurch.com, and we'll try to talk about the question that you ask if you send it out. And if we get too many questions, then maybe your question will make it in.
Well, and just know that we're, if you've been watching the videos, we're not outing anybody. Like we're not actually, Zach doesn't even know.
I don't even know who the questions are.
He doesn't even know who the questions are from. And so just know we're going to keep that private, or confidential. Like
Yeah.
we want you to ask questions, and when you ask questions, I'm sure other people have had those same questions.
For sure. All right, well, you actually made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. So we will see you guys next week, and we'll be answering more questions for session 5. So check out session 5, and we will see you then.
All right, have a great week.